The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end.
Talking peace, could an immediate ceasefire be on the table? What the president had to say after speaking with both Ukraine and Russia presidents.
We've lost everything. We don't have clothes, we don't have shoes, we don't have food, we don't, there's nothing.
Kentucky left reeling after several tornadoes ripped through the state. Which states are on alert with more extreme weather expected? And then President Biden's health under a microscope as the country learns of his cancer diagnosis. Questions over how long others may have known. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, we are glad you're here with us starting your Monday off. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin as tornado threats are making their way all across the entire country right now. Just in the last hour, several tornado warnings expired over Oklahoma, but tornado watches are in effect for parts of Texas, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri, as well as Iowa and Nebraska until at least 9 Central Time tonight. This as residents of Kentucky are sifting through the damage after more than 24 possible tornadoes damaged hundreds of homes and tossed vehicles like tree limbs. Kentucky officials say at least 9 people were killed and another 10 were seriously injured. Governor Andy Beshear warns the death toll may rise as some of those injured are in critical condition.
It's hard to see. Homes that are in a single wall left standing. Some homes that have all 4 walls yet lost the person inside. You can not only see the destruction, but feel it.
Residents in parts of Alabama are also assessing the damage after severe storms. High winds, look, they ripped trees down. The flooding eroded pavement on parts of the road. A tree fell on a Cottondale resident Laura Kersey's house. She says half of it landed on her home and the other half on sheds. Rain was pouring into her home through the ceiling.
Done a lot of damage, and it is a big inconvenience. Like, we can't use our shower. The shower has a hole in it. There is no getting clean.
The region faces more possible severe storms tomorrow, including possible tornadoes, damaging wind, and large hail. New developments tonight. President Trump says Russia and Ukraine will immediately start ceasefire negotiations after an excellent call with Putin. The National News Desk, Matt Gelka, has the very latest from Washington.
A series of high-stakes phone calls between President Donald Trump and the leaders of both Ukraine and Russia. Trump spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin individually over the phone Monday. Trump has referred to the war as a bloodbath and called for it to end.
We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation.
On Truth Social, Trump said the 2-hour call with Putin went very well, stating that Russia and Ukraine would immediately start negotiations on a ceasefire and an end to the war. He also said Russia wants to engage in large-scale trade with the U.S. and that the Vatican is interested in hosting the peace talks. Prior to the call, the vice president speculated Putin didn't know how to get out of the war he started with Ukraine.
He's re-engineered his entire economy. What used to be manufacturing facilities making products for people to use in their civilian life, they're now making tank shells and artillery shells and drones. And so this is a little bit of guess, but I think the president would agree that part of this is I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin has a strategy himself for how to unwind the war.
The phone calls come after a weekend drone blitz on Ukraine by Russia, where more than 270 exploding drones and decoys were deployed. The vice president met with Zelensky in Rome over the weekend to talk peace negotiations and a potential ceasefire, and also bury the hatchet from a contentious Oval Office exchange in February.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Putin no-showed face-to-face peace negotiations in Turkey last week, with the White House saying President Trump has grown increasingly frustrated with how talks have gone.
And the president had previously put the prospect of tough economic sanctions for Russia back on the table, saying it's an option he hopes he doesn't have to use.
Matt, did Putin or Zelensky say anything about the call? What are their comments?
Well, Russia's president called the call candid when he spoke to journalists today, saying any peace deal needs to remove the, quote, root cause of the war. Zelensky posted online Ukraine had already been committed to a ceasefire and peace deal, but said sanctions on Russia should be considered if they show they're not serious about a deal.
Live from Washington, Matt Gelka, thank you. Live look over New Orleans, where an urgent manhunt for 7 escaped inmates stretches into a 4th day. Right now, dozens of law enforcement agencies, they are working around the clock to find these men. You see them behind me, as well as the ones captured after they escaped with 3 others just after midnight on Friday. Now, investigators are saying these inmates were able to escape through a hole in a wall hidden behind a toilet. As you take a look behind me at that scene, then we are told they scaled down a wall, they sprinted out of the prison, and they ran across the interstate. The men, they range from 19 years old to 42 years old. They face a variety of charges, including aggravated assault, domestic abuse, battery, and murder. The FBI is now offering a $10,000 reward per inmate. Meantime, an internal investigation into how this all unfolded remains ongoing. 3 jail staff members have since been suspended without pay. And developing right now, former President Joe Biden is speaking out after his prostate cancer diagnosis. In a post on X, Biden shared a picture of himself and former First Lady Jill Biden. The former president wrote in part that cancer touches us all, and he and his wife are discovering they are stronger in broken places. Biden thanked the public for their love and support. Meantime, there's a chance the former President Joe Biden can undergo treatment after being diagnosed with prostate cancer. Vice President of the Urology Group in Cincinnati, Dr. Stephen Kappa, said effective treatment is available.
What will likely happen in his case is he'll do a combination of therapies, hormone therapy, number one, which can be done with a shot or a pill. It's a pretty simple treatment, and then additionally targeted therapies.
In a statement, Biden's office said that while the disease appears to be aggressive, effective management is possible due to its hormone sensitivity. The former president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his doctors. Questions, meanwhile, are coming up about how long the family possibly knew about this diagnosis. Congressman Greg Murphy, who is also a licensed and practicing urologist, posted on X it takes about 5 weeks to learn about hormone treatment plans. This comes as more questions emerge about former President Joe Biden's cognitive health as president and what media outlets knew about it. National correspondent Christine Frizzell with a look back and a look ahead.
In terms of taxes that they refused to, for example.
In retrospect, many in Washington now admit there were signs of cognitive decline by President Joe Biden.
The Democrats should just be straight up that he should not have run.
But one of the biggest questions to emerge ahead of a new book detailing that decline and those who covered it up is, why wasn't this story more widely covered at the time?
I think what there was not was enough very clear, vigilant, and tough questioning and coverage about what everybody could see.
In June 2024, this Wall Street Journal article reported, behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping. It was dismissed for a lack of named sources, despite speaking to more than 45 people over the course of several months.
I am sort of actually embarrassed for the Wall Street Journal.
When this company, Sinclair, dug into the story, it was labeled as a conservative media conglomerate amplifying misleading attacks of Biden's fitness.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
Following Biden's only presidential debate with Donald Trump, deemed disastrous even by some of Biden's biggest supporters, questions did emerge. The president soon after dropping out of the race.
Let's be really clear about this. The president's health, both physical and mental, is a story. The capacity of the person in the Oval Office to think clearly and quickly on these immense decisions and issues that come before him is a critical matter and is, frankly, a lead story.
The just-released audio recordings of then-President Biden speaking with special counsel Robert Hur, along with that new book, Original Sin, have already evoked many more questions. And now the House Oversight Committee says it plans to investigate what Republicans call a cover-up of Biden's mental decline. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
The nightmare continues in the air traffic control tower at the Newark Liberty International Airport. The FAA is now looking into a new radio outage happening around 11:30 this morning. The disruption happened after a new software patch was installed to correct the recent problems. The outage lasted only 2 seconds, but it led to a 45-minute ground stop just in case for safety. New York's Brooklyn Bridge, we are learning, is intact. That's according to federal officials after a Mexican Navy ship crashed into it on Saturday, killing 2 Mexican Navy cadets. Nearly 24 other crew members were injured, 3 critically. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating what caused this, suggesting it could have been an engine failure. The investigators revealing just minutes before the 3 masts struck the bridge and snapped, the ship sharply turned and sped up towards the bridge. Despite the impact, the bridge itself is structurally sound.
There is no significant structural damage to the load-bearing elements of the bridge. There is some damage on one of the travelers, which they use to access and survey the bridge at this point, but nothing structural from the bridge.
Officials say a preliminary report on what may have caused the incident will come out in 30 days. They are currently gathering evidence and working with the Mexican government to get access to the ship and crew members to interview them. The board is asking the public for any footage of the crash. And beginning tomorrow morning, New Jersey Transit will be back in service, bringing a sigh of relief to hundreds of thousands of commuters across the state. This is an agreement was reached to end the state's first transit strike in more than 40 years. Neither party revealed the terms of the tentative agreement. However, the New Jersey Transit CEO said it was fair and fiscally responsible, adding that it is now the union's job to go back and ratify the deal at its next meeting scheduled for June 11th. The governor's office said rail service would resume tomorrow because it takes 24 hours to inspect and check tracks and rail cars before returning to full service. The second week of testimony began in the sex trafficking case against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Now, the prosecution called multiple witnesses to corroborate Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura's testimony last week. Among the witnesses were former Danity Kane band member Don Richard, whose group was dissolved by Combs's former record label, as well as Carrie Morgan, a former friend of Cassie Ventura. Morgan said their relationship ended when Cassie took Diddy's side after he allegedly struck her with a wooden clothes hanger. The defense questioned both, seeming to attempt to say that personal animus against the defendant may be influencing their testimony. After a late week setback, the big, beautiful bill back on track. Just how soon it can get to the House floor. And then aid is flowing back into the Gaza Strip. Why Israel says this time they'll keep it from Hamas. And the rise of anti-Semitism grows across the country as a series of Jewish organizations have received letters with threatening messages. We'll be right back. reconciliation budget and tax legislation, coined as the one big beautiful bill, getting closer to passing the House of Representatives. The House Budget Committee voted on party lines last night to move the bill onto the Rules Committee after failing to do so on Friday. One of the changes was modifying the work requirement for access to Medicaid.
The president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society. We want to see able-bodied Americans at least working 20 hours per week, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's even looking for work or volunteering for 20 hours a week if they are receiving Medicaid.
President Trump is expected to meet with House Republicans tomorrow morning on Capitol Hill to discuss passing the measure as soon as possible. The Rules Committee will take the bill on Wednesday, setting up a possible vote on House floor Thursday before the House goes on to recess. In the Rose Garden today, President Trump was joined by the First Lady as he signed the Take It Down Act. This new law requires all online websites to remove any and all sexual explicit imagery, whether authentic or an AI deepfake, when requested by the subject video or pictures. Melania Trump, First Lady, speaking about the bill that she made a priority as it made its way through Congress.
This legislation is a powerful step forward in our efforts to ensure that every American, especially young people, can feel better protected from their image or identity being abused through non-consensual or intimate imagery of I and CII.
We will not tolerate online sexual exploitation, and especially it's gone on at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's getting worse and worse, and I think this is going to hopefully stop it.
A federal judge ruled against the Trump administration, saying the U.S. Institute of Peace was illegally overtaken by DOJ. This marched the majority of the board. They were dismissed before Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth revealed plans to install their own interim USIP president. The judge says the institute is not part of the executive branch and was created by Congress. Therefore, staff changes must be overseen by congressional committees. The Trump administration did get a win today, as the Supreme Court is allowing them to strip legal protections from about 350,000 Venezuelans, opening them up to possible deportation. President Biden had placed them on temporary protected status, which would have otherwise expired last month if not for rulings by a federal judge in San Francisco. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was the only dissenter on the court. For the first time in about 3 months, humanitarian aid trucks entered into Gaza from the Kerem Shalom crossing in Israel. UN authorities calling it a welcome development, but say that far more aid is needed. Israel's prime minister says he decided to resume limited basic aid to Gaza after diplomatic pressure from allies. At the same time, Israel has also increased their military campaign known as Gideon's Chariots.
Eventually, we will have an area fully controlled by the IDF, where Gaza's civilian population can receive aid while Hamas gets nothing. This is part of the effort to defeat Hamas, alongside the intense military pressure and our massive incursion, which is essentially aimed at taking control of all of Gaza and stripping Hamas of any ability to loot humanitarian aid.
Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with the first American-born Pope Leo XIV earlier today. Both of them attended the Pope's inaugural Mass on Sunday. According to Vance's office, the leaders discussed their shared goal of ending the conflict with Russia and the current state of negotiations for a ceasefire. He also gave the Pope a letter from President Trump.
The vice president passed along a letter to the Pope from the president and from the First Lady, extending their warm wishes and inviting them to the White House as soon as they possibly can come.
Capital One has agreed to pay $425 million in a multi-state settlement with depositors. Customers say the credit company falsely promised high interest rates on 360 savings accounts. $360 million will go to cover the interest lost in the accounts, while the rest of the money will go to depositors with currently open 360 savings accounts. Capital One admits no wrongdoing in the settlement. Capital One also is acquiring Discover Financial Services for $35 billion. The deal was finalized yesterday after it was announced 15 months ago. In a press release, Capital One CEO said the deal will continue to allow the company to, quote, change banking for good for customers. At this stage, both companies have said nothing will change for Discover customers. Coming up, a direct threat of a police officer caught on tape, recorded by the assailant. What happened next? Right after this. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Maryland, where a man pled guilty to posting a video on social media threatening police.
In the short Instagram clip, 20-year-old William Alvarenga, behind the wheel of his mother's Toyota, zooms in to the Montgomery County motorcycle officer in front of him. Then he shows the Glock handgun with extended magazine in his hand. He raises it, all while an on-screen caption reads, "Should I smoke him?" Police were able to track him down after seeing the video. In circuit court, Alvarenga was sentenced to 5 years after he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit first-degree assault, illegal possession of a gun, and drug charges. Lee Holland, president of the Montgomery County Fraternal Order of Police, calls that social media post eye-opening.
It shows that there is people in our community that target law enforcement just because we're law enforcement, right? That person in this video or that's being charged has no idea who that officer is. He was just targeting that person because they had a police patch on them. They were driving a police motorcycle.
We're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism, harassment, intimidation, threats towards the Jewish community. And it really, speaks to the normalization of anti-Semitism. And we cannot stay quiet. We must continue to stay vigilant.
Thursday morning, local Rabbi Levi Harley of Chabad of Southern Nevada and CEO of Jewish nonprofit organization Friendship Circle Las Vegas took to social media announcing his dismay after having received an anti-Semitic letter addressed to the nonprofit.
The Jewish community is scared. We are scared to go to synagogue. We are scared to be able to walk down the streets wearing our yarmulkes and to identify as Jewish.
The letter, which in short calls for the destruction and removal of Jewish communities in Southern Nevada, was also sent to other local Jewish organizations.
When you hear an incident of hate towards any group, you must speak out. We cannot allow the normalization of hate towards any group to take place. And one incident is one incident too many.
I asked, why? Why are you giving us this extra money?
Claudia Balducci says she was caught off guard by this email from the council's chief operating officer with great news that an additional $35,000 was added to your budget with no restrictions on how the funds can be spent. Do you believe this is a waste of money?
I do.
The King County Council member says the Employment and Administrative Committee, chaired by colleague Gurmai Zahalai, made the unusual move to grant the money to each district office in an April 1st meeting that is not available to the public on King County's website, with an intention to use the money for district campaign flyers, even though the county faces significant budget challenges. Zahalai declined an interview but issued a statement blistering Balducci, who he is running against for King County Executive, calling the wasteful allegation a desperate political stunt. The move, a simple internal reallocation moving funds from one underspent administrative account to another, and Balducci is complaining because she's trailing in fundraising, endorsements, and grassroots support in her campaign for county executive.
I asked the chair to consider that this didn't look right or ethical, and I got no response.
Coming up, dessert lovers, watch out for what is in your freezer, why a new recall alert has just been issued. We'll be right back in 90 seconds. Nearly 18,000 containers of ice cream is being recalled due to possible plastic contamination. According to the FDA, Wells Enterprises issued a voluntary recall last month for its ice cream and frozen yogurt brands. The FDA says this is a Class 2 recall, meaning if consumed, it may cause temporary adverse health consequences. This recall, as you see here, it includes 22 flavors of brands Blue Bunny and Halo Top. The products were labeled with best if used by dates from March to October 2026. That's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again tonight as we track the dangerous weather threats as a new tornado warnings have been issued over parts of Oklahoma and Nebraska. We're tracking it all. See you tonight.